Get in on the action this season with Underdog's Pick'em game. Select higher or lower between 2 and 8 players and compete for up to 325 times your entry. Use code DIRECTOR when signing up to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash and a free pick. Yo to Bolt fam, it's the Director. Chargers fans, man, we got ourselves a huge game coming up, Monday Night Football, that is absolutely jam-packed with narrative stories, headlines, and it's going to be a good one, man. After the Chargers took down the Kansas City Chiefs in their season opener in Brazil, they're looking to continue their AFC West tour and find a dub versus them Raiders, which, again, some big things happening in this game. I think none bigger than the rivalry returning to the NFL of Jim Harbaugh and Pete Carroll. Guys, this is pretty significant. I did a lot of digging for this video, prepared a really cool statement, or I should say segment, on what the whole Pete Carroll versus Jim Harbaugh aspect is going to look like, and it's pretty interesting, man. It's pretty cool. I can't wait to show you guys. So with that, man, we got a lot to unpack in this one. Carroll versus Harbaugh, Janty versus Hampton. It's going to be a very interesting one. Before we do kick things off, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog. Use code DIRECTOR to receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash, as well as get in on the $5 thing. Play just $5, get 50 in bonus funds to work with as well. So many cool things to take advantage of, including a lot of these tokens and profit boosts and stuff that you can use as well. If you guys want to take a look at some of my entries for next week, here we go, man. The Monday Night Football. We got Keenan, Herbert, and Ashton Jeanty. Of course, you have to have one player from each team, at least one. I'm going to go with this one, too. I like the running back narrative, so we're going to go with Hampton and Ashton Jeanty on this one. And then finally, the last one here, which is pretty cool, Herbert, Quentin Johnston, and Geno Smith. Good luck to everybody out there copying or fading. It's up to you guys. It's a great way to support my platform, have some fun along the way, and really dive into this Monday night matchup. Before we do kick things off, hit us up with a like and sub if you do enjoy this Chargers content. It's a moment of time. You guys take the like, sub, bell notification. Helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action.
Who's got it better than us?
Your Chargers at Raiders Week 2 game preview. And this one's going to be pretty special, man. Normally when we do game previews, we do things a certain way. We go over, a laundry list of stuff. But this time around, we've got ourselves a very unique narrative unfolding right in front of our eyes here in Week 2. Blinked and you would have missed it. This is the headline, man. This is the big thing to pay attention to here in Week 2. So much so that I think I may end up cutting this segment out of the video and doing a whole separate video just so everybody understands, the environment that we're going into on Monday, because it's very interesting. So with that being said, man, you guys ready for some story time? The Jim Harbaugh versus Pete Carroll rivalry from beginning to end, and why this matchup for the Chargers versus the Raiders carries so much weight within that rivalry. So to begin, man, if you really want to find, all the details, we got to go a ways back, because this beef goes a ways back. Funny enough, if you want to include everything, Harbaugh and Carroll would first face each other back in 1991. Raise your hand if you were born back then. I can't even say that. Isn't that absolutely insane? Where Harbaugh was the quarterback of the Bears at the time. Of course, he played a couple of different teams throughout his career as a quarterback. Bears, Colts, Chargers, of course. And this is the first time those two would go head-to-head, where he would lead a huge win versus the Jets, which, by the way, was where Pete Carroll was the defensive coordinator. So that was the first taste for Pete Carroll of Jim Harbaugh. Later, Carroll would become the defensive coordinator of the 49ers in 1995. Harbaugh, who at that point is now the quarterback for the Colts, would take him down once again in that season. But finally, a little bit later, right, 1997, Carroll, who just landed his first head coaching gig in the NFL with the Patriots, would sweep Harbaugh's Colts in that season in that same division where, yes, they had a lot of sample size of each other at that point. Fast forward to 2007, where Pete Carroll is leading the charge in college football as one of the most lethal teams in the nation. And in 2007, Jim Harbaugh entered the Pac-10 conference with Stanford. This is where Carroll's number 2 ranked USC Trojans would also reside. USC was favored by 40 points in a matchup that Stanford versus USC players would never forget. At this point, you got to remember, Stanford sucked. Prior to Jim Harbaugh, they had a 1-11 season back in 2006. So going into this matchup, nobody gave Stanford a chance here. But despite all of that, Harbaugh took this rinky-dink team to the Coliseum and shocked the world. And Pete Carroll was officially on notice. This bubble would surface or come to the surface in that legendary 2009 meeting between Stanford and USC. Jim Harbaugh would once again storm the Coliseum with his new quarterback, by the way, Andrew Luck. He was going up against a number 9 ranked team in USC, and not only went in there as the underdogs once again and beat them, but he absolutely obliterated them. This game was insane because up to quarter 3, although Stanford was in control from the get-go, the score was just 28-21. But getting into that fourth quarter, dude, Harbaugh would not only hold USC to no points, but he dropped another 4 touchdowns on their heads. He wouldn't stop. He poured it on. And Pete Carroll was furious. This is where that infamous moment comes from in college football. The "what's your deal" encounter between Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh. And to further explain that, after the game, after this epic beatdown by Stanford against, again, the number 9 team in the nation, USC, the coaches go to the middle of the field to shake hands, and Pete Carroll walks up to him furious. You can see the flames in his eyes. Say, "What's your deal?" Jim Harbaugh looks at him and goes, Huh? What's your deal?" Absolutely epic moment between the two. And at this point, you could really tell that the rivalry was going to stick for a long time. So long as these two kept playing each other, the beef was going to be there. In 2010, Pete Carroll, after some, what we're going to say is sketchy allegations, decided to go to the NFL. Maybe a little bit, familiar for Chargers fans as well. He would go coach the Seattle Seahawks, where, of course, he's going to see an awesome beginning to a journey in his career as a head coach, right? And at this point, this was also the year Harbaugh took his Stanford team to his legendary 12-1 season, ending the year as the number 4 team in the nation. Mind you, this was a 1-11 team when he adopted it. He also grabbed a huge win in the Orange Bowl, and every single organization in the NFL were nipping at the heels of Jim Harbaugh to hire him as their next head coach. And you know what? A team did land coach Harbaugh. The following season, Harbaugh would join the ranks of the NFL head coaches with the San Francisco 49ers. Of course, joining his rival, Pete Carroll, in the NFC West. Which is, again, I have to imagine back then the narratives, the stories, the epicness of everybody, following that rivalry were absolutely freaking out that, of course, that's where he would end up. And oh boy, this is where the rivalry really started to boil over. Harbaugh would quickly lead the 49ers, who went 6-10 in 2010, mind you, before he was hired. He would convert them to a huge 13-3 season in his first year as head coach, taking number 1 in the division. Mind you, Pete Carroll, he's watching this guy come back in. His first season takes control of the division. It had to have been pretty interesting for Coach Carroll at the time. Now, he would stomp Carroll's Seahawks in both matchups in that season, landing Seattle in the 3rd place spot in the NFC West. They had plenty of beef, man. There was a lot of opportunities for them to take jabs, and they absolutely took them. There's various interviews, press conferences, quotes that you can find between the two that were not so nice. And that was absolutely alive and well in the NFC West between those two teams. The rivalry would go back and forth for over the next 4 seasons. Harbaugh would win the division again while taking his team to the Super Bowl. Meanwhile, Carroll absolutely was establishing the legendary Legion of Boom era with Russell Wilson, who was a rookie at the time in that period. Man, did he find himself in the driver's seat after a few seasons, too. He'd go on to the big game. 2, as a matter of fact, 2 Super Bowl appearances, one of them that huge win in 2012 that defined them as a franchise. Carroll Seahawks remained one of the best teams in the NFL for many years. Meanwhile, for Jim Harbaugh, by 2014, Harbaugh had a difficult time coexisting with the 49ers GM and front office, which led ultimately to their divorce. He'd later go on to coach at his alma mater, Michigan Wolverines, turning them from a pitiful 5-7 program to the number 12 ranked monster team they were at 10-3 overnight. Jim Harbaugh, he knows nothing else than turning struggling programs into some of the best teams in the nation. They remained a massive presence in football for many years, eventually winning a national championship in 2023. The history between these two is epic. The success stories between them is epic. And now fast forward to today. Here we go, Chargers fans. Oh! Jim Harbaugh, now the coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. And now in 2025, Pete Carroll joins the AFC West. The same division as his longtime rival Jim Harbaugh and the Bolts. Harbaugh, who, of course, has already been working his magic, is looking awesome. He's taken the Chargers from a 5-12 season in 2023. Yeah, where the last season of Staley and that nightmare. He, once again, overnight, brought us 11 wins in 2024 in his first year. He and Justin Herbert look like the real deal in the AFC West, in the whole entirety of the NFL. Then here comes Pete Carroll, his first season. Of course, he got off to a pretty good start last week, a win versus New England. But he was ultimately adopting a pretty decimated team. It was very mismanaged from the top to bottom. And I think they're trying to replicate what the Chargers saw so much success with last year in Jim Harbaugh. In his first offseason, Carroll's managed to assemble a very much improved roster, including Geno Smith at quarterback and Ashton Jeanty at running back. It's going to be a good matchup, man. Harbaugh and Carroll. These guys are squaring up again for the first time in 11 years. And the history between the two makes this matchup that much more epic. So I wanted to thoroughly cover the history of these two coaches before even getting into the game because of how much weight it actually carries. I think a lot of people may have forgotten the rivalry that was alive and well between the two because of how much time has passed since they last faced each other in Seattle and San Francisco. But trust me, we've already started to see quotes between the two. Recently, Pete Carroll said, "Yeah, I know the Jim Harbaugh, no fond memories for me." Don't quote me directly, but it had something to do with that. Jim Harbaugh, meanwhile, is saying, "Yeah, we know each other. I've got great respect for him." He says, "We would have been friends if we were, coaching on the same team at any point." But he says he's definitely not on his Christmas cards. We're not quite sure what that's going to equate to in this matchup, but all of that weight in history really brings forth a very exciting narrative for me as a Chargers fan in this one because it carries just so much weight. All right? So with that out of the way, and thank you guys for sitting through that and learning about this history because I think it's very important to this matchup, let's get into some of the meat and potatoes of this game and what to expect. Another really fun narrative to follow between the two teams is how both of them want to operate as an offense and the fact that both of them went and grabbed one of the very best rookie running backs we've seen in many years. Of course, we saw the Vegas Raiders draft Ashton Jeanty very early in the first round. Later, the Chargers would answer with Omari and Hampton. Both of these guys extremely special. We know Ashton Jeanty, man. We talked about him all offseason leading up to the draft as this revolutionary running back with some of the most incredible balance that you're ever going to see. Break tackles for days. He's got speed, shiftiness, low to the ground, cannonball mentality of running the football. He was exactly what the Raiders were looking for, especially in a Pete Carroll offense. Of course, he's not going to be beast mode, but there's a lot to like about him that you can use him in the same ways. Then you got Omari and Hampton, the UNC UNC workhorse who went for so many yards so consistently in his career. A lot of people, credited Drake May and his quarterbacking, but even when Drake May was drafted to the NFL, leaving, Hampton, the last remaining great player on the UNC offense, he absolutely thrived, still putting up crazy numbers, and showed that he's going to be the real deal in the NFL. Both of these guys are some of the most incredible running backs that I have covered on my channel. It feels like another Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson situation unfolding. Both of these guys have insane upside. Of course, I will say, I'm not going to lie not admit that Ashton Genty was certainly higher for me. I'm sure everybody, in the NFL leading up to the draft. He reminds me a lot of, the perspective of Bijan Robinson coming in. Of course, I think Bijan's ultimately going to be a better running back, but, a lot of people very excited about Ashton Genty and what his impact could be for any NFL offense in the league. But behind him was this guy, I'm going to say behind Bijan Robinson was this guy Gibbs in that draft as well, which a lot of people were very, very high on, including the Detroit Lions, who ended up taking him in the first round, despite a lot of people saying, I should have been a later pick, this and that. Well, let's see how that worked out for that team. Gibbs, now one of the centerpieces of that offense, is really helping the Lions fire on all cylinders. We have to wait and see if that translates this year without Ben Johnson. But the dynamic is very exciting to see in relation to what the Chargers and Raiders now have in their rookie running backs. What makes it even more exciting is that they are in the same division with two head coaches that have been duking it out for decades. That is what's up for grabs on Monday in terms of narratives, which is very, very exciting. Okay. Now, individually as players, they maybe didn't have the huge debut everybody was expecting in week one. I think partially that has to do with the exceptional defensive lines that they went up against individually as players in week one. Ashton Genty versus the New England Patriots. That's something that maybe he struggled with, only 2 yards per carry in that matchup. He did score the touchdown, but off to a slower start than he would have liked. And then meanwhile, Amari and Hampton, I think he was around 3.2 yards per carry, around 50 yards versus the Kansas City Chiefs, which we all know have a great run defense. Both of these guys are going to be looking to bounce back in this game, and I think that we're going to see a pretty nice matchup between the two. I'm not going to say that we see the best running game from either one of them, but I do think you're going to notice the impact of both of these players in this matchup. It's going to be a lot of fun. So that whole narrative, very exciting to follow. Next up, another connection which is very undeniable, right? We got the Herbert and Jim Harbaugh versus Pete Carroll and Geno Smith aspect to go through as well. Let's start with Justin Herbert, okay? Herbert, one of the biggest reasons Jim Harbaugh likely took the job in Los Angeles, has been an absolute monster to start the season. Going into Brazil, a very foreign and unpredictable environment for the Chargers. Yes, the Chiefs too, but considering that was our home game, was a leap for Justin Herbert to have to make in week one, and he absolutely rocked the Chiefs' world in that matchup to take them 1-0, and it was a very impressive outing on all aspects of Justin Herbert's game. His leadership, his pocket presence, his ability to read the field and find the open man, which he, of course, has a lot of options now, but also his ability to run with the football. We saw, I have to assume, 5 or 6, maybe even 7 rushing attempts from Justin Herbert, which equated to around 30 or 40 yards. It would have been closer to 50 if one hadn't been called back by penalty. All aspects of Justin Herbert look to be at the very, very top of his game this season. And that obviously, I think for everybody in the NFL going into this matchup, gives the edge to the Chargers. Okay, Justin Herbert is an absolute monster. He had an MVP, level performance versus the Chiefs in week one in a very tough environment, and he found himself on top. Super exciting to think about what he can do in this game. Of course, maybe the Raiders are thinking the same thing of the Chargers, like the Chiefs did, where they're going to come out running, they're going to lean on Amari and Hampton, they're going to be this tough physical Jim Harbaugh team, for them to just, shift gears all of a sudden and go crazy with Justin Herbert. I just saw a interview from one of the Chiefs coaches saying, yeah, we all expected them to run like crazy, but instead they changed gears and completely threw everybody off guard. I'm excited to see how they decide to attack the Raiders with Justin Herbert here in week 2. Herbert, of course, does have a whole lot of help, by the way, before going on to the defense. Lots and lots and lots of great things from his weapons like Quentin Johnson, Ladd McConkey. Excited to get into all that, too. Defense could also feast in this one. This is a game where, historically, the Chargers can be pretty dangerous, especially in the Khalil Mack era of the Chargers. That looks pretty good right now. Chargers pass rush, who I'm going to say did struggle a little bit last week, find themselves in a situation where they've been very successful in recent history, in particular Khalil Mack, who alone has 10.5 sacks and 3 forced fumbles versus the Raiders in his 6 games in his career versus them. And I think, honestly, he's in for another one this week, as the Raiders' offensive line is really not that good right now. We saw a lot of struggle, of course, from Ashton Jeanty in week 1. Protection for Geno Smith was not looking good. I think they ended up getting 4 sacks on Geno last week, the New England Patriots did. The Chargers, I would expect to be in the same, hemisphere here. I wouldn't be shocked to see, 4 or 5 or even 6 sacks for the Chargers, with Khalil Mack and Thule leading the way. Of course, Derwin James and the secondary have been getting involved more recently. So we got that to look forward to. I think the defense should have themselves a lot of opportunity to get to the quarterback and maybe force some turnovers this week. I'm also high on the Chargers getting on the board in terms of takeaways, which they were so good at last season, of course. Finally, let's take a look at some of the defense, or I should say some of the opponents' players. We talked about Justin Herbert. Geno Smith, I am going to say, is looking very sharp. I don't remember how many yards total that he got last week, but I think it was in the realm of like 300 or 350 yards. He was absolutely on fire versus the New England Patriots in week 1. It goes to show, what the chemistry between, of course, Pete Carroll and Geno Smith, who, coached together and played together in Seattle for so many years. The history, again, going down so many levels in this game between several different players, from, Geno Smith and Ashton Jeanty to Pete Carroll, and now Amar and Hampton, Justin Herbert to Jim Harbaugh. Geno's one that I'm going to be cautious of because of that week 1 performance. I know that the Patriots may not have had all their best guys out there. I know they're not the best defense in the world as they're rebuilding with their new coach as well. But that many yards is something to pay attention to. I will say this, though. I don't think that Geno is going to outperform Patrick Mahomes. Okay, if Patrick Mahomes couldn't throw for over 250 yards on the Chargers, I'm not quite sure if Geno Smith's going to be able to do the same thing. Some of you guys are going to say, it's Geno, or it's Patrick Mahomes. Of course, he's going to, do this and that. Even though he doesn't have weapons or whatever, but Geno doesn't have the craziest roster yet either. We've got Brock Bowers, who's awesome, Ashton Jeanty, maybe a little bit of Jacoby Myers, but outside of that, you got Jack Besh, who's unproven. Dante Thornton, who, again, I like both of those guys a lot coming into the draft, but it's a big ask for them to go up against a Jesse Minter defense that's going to be getting at the quarterback all day. It's going to be a fun one, man. So Geno Smith, although I'm cautious, he had himself a very good week 1. I think the Chargers are going to make life pretty difficult on him. But again, maybe the biggest matchup on defense that I'm going to be anticipating for the Chargers is going to be Brock Bowers, maybe. The last I've heard, before recording this video, Brock Bowers had not been practicing. Now, what is it today? Friday. He had not practiced as well today, which is going to make me, ask questions as whether or not he's going to be available to the Raiders on Monday. But we got to be prepared for him because I think that he is their best offensive player. He's one that's going to make the Chargers have to think about where he is at all time on the field. But, at the same time, we got Derwin James, who historically, right, has been going up against some of the best tight ends in football, including Travis Kelce in his prime. Feels like we got a new Travis Kelce in the AFC West. His name is Brock Bowers. Derwin James has commented on how excited he is for that matchup, and I think luckily we've got the pieces to keep him in check. So with all that being said, man, a lot of fun things to follow in this game, a lot of epicness to get excited for, but ultimately, behind the narratives and everything that's leading up to this game, the Chargers' number 1 goal is going to come out of this with a win. And of course, that's because of the Chargers' crazy schedule to start the season with 3 back-to-back-to-back AFC West division matchups. Of course, we took down the Chiefs, which is absolutely so killer. It's going to provide great momentum for the Chargers going into this matchup versus the Raiders. But imagine winning 3 AFC West matchups to start the season, firmly placing you at the top of the division. That would be awesome. Even going 2-1 is extremely significant to start the year off because that sets you up for success later in the year. Now, of course, I do have the Chargers as the better team right now. I think the Raiders are going to start to sneak up on us eventually. But right now, with Jim Harbaugh and his success in year one and finding some momentum now in year two as a team that just took down the AFC champions in the Kansas City Chiefs, we got to give it to the Chargers as the more likely team to win this one. My score prediction for week 2 of the Chargers versus Raiders are the Bolts taking the dub with 27 points to the Raiders 17. You guys in the comment section below, let me know what your score predictions are as well. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Give me an Omarion Hampton season or first career touchdown with the Chargers on Monday. Let's do it, dude.